Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was March 20th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document comes from the Secret Seal Register of Joan. And again, just want to repeat because I haven't said it for a little while, when we use the word secret, we're really talking about something that would today in English be designated as private. It's not like the top secret designation of classified documents. It's more about how these are the letters that have a level of privacy, but it's not like they're revealing anything dangerous if they fell into the wrong hands. And this letter is a really good example of that because it is a whole bunch of pleasantries and vague positive updates. There's a few things in it that are definitely worth noting, and we'll get to that. The sender is, of course, Joan. The recipient is the King of Navarre. The letter begins, Muy caro hermano. And you might notice that sounds a little bit different than the Catalan words that we're used to. And that's because this letter is not in a kind of pure Catalan. This letter is really a Castilian and Aragonese and maybe a little bit of Catalan thrown in there here and there, but it's demonstrating an effort to write in the language that's more comfortable for the recipient. So it's not a Catalan letter, and also hermano has an H, which is something that anyone who speaks Castilian today would immediately recognize when often in the Catalan you'll see hermano with a G at the beginning. Also, muito in Catalan versus muy in Spanish. And then caro with an with an O at the end. All right, so I went out of order there with those three words, but you know, you get the idea, right? This is not the kind of Catalan that is typical. And that's just a reflection of how either Joan himself or the chancery scribes are making adjustments in order to come across as more inviting and pleasant and considerate and courteous to the recipient, the King of Navarre. Something else about the addressee line. So the first line in Latin, fuit missa regi Navarre, or Navarre, Navarrem. Oh gosh. Once again, this would, I think, be the genitive of Navarre. Okay. I'm just going to let that go. That line is very clear. All right, this was sent to the King of Navarre. The second line, similis fuit, and then we've got something like another word with an F. So I think that is amounting to a similar one was also sent. And then we've got regine for queen. And the next word was one that really stumped me. and initially it also stumped Gemini and Claude. And I like to think that if I had just really worked at this for another 10 minutes or like taken a break and come back to it, I could have figured it out on my own, because once Claude came up with the answer based on my just telling Claude what I could see, Claude was able to figure it out quite quickly. So the letters that I see are a capital U or a V. They were very interchangeable at this time, U and V. Then the letter X. And then there's a space, and then an S-U-E. And I was not remembering one of the most early words that you learn as you're learning Latin, which is uxore. It means wife. And so once I put in UX into the conversation that I was having with Claude, Claude was like, of course, this is uxore sue, his wife. The queen, his wife. So once again, we have an episode in which the chatbot is able to help me make the breakthrough. In this situation, it saved me some time. I'm quite sure that I would have gotten that eventually. I like to think so. Is it diminishing my abilities by using it as a crutch like that? Yeah, but again, bigger picture, my destiny is not to be a long-term practicing medievalist, and so for my purposes, this is an okay thing. If you are listening to this and you plan to do about 20 or 30 years of work in medieval studies, please don't do what I do. Please take that time to really learn Latin, because it will pay off for you in all kinds of ways. And then later on, I'm sure AI will have developed where you can do some supervision of it, and that's great. But Shadow is echoing my sentiment there. If you're really going to go into medieval studies, then learn that Latin, because it will open up meanings and understandings for you, and is an investment that will pay off if you're in this for that long haul. Let's talk about the content of this letter. It is, like I said before, just a series of general pleasantries. Hi, I hope you're doing all right. I think of you affectionately, blah, blah, blah. Give me good news. I have good news, da, da, da. There's a couple things, though, that have additional resonance when we have in mind what we've already learned about Joan and Violante. First, in the 5th line, Joan says, Nos deliberado e bien quitio del accidente que huivemos en nuestra persona. So he is saying he has been delivered and he has been freed well from the accident, misfortune that he had in his body. So he's talking about the illness that they're trying to make everybody forget about. So there's this major damage control that we've seen happening from Violante as she's writing to her family and others in France. Don't believe the rumors. And Joan here is saying to the King of Navarre, you might have heard that I was kind of sick, but you know what? It is done. I am totally fine. Everything's fine. Nothing to worry about. It's all great. And then he goes on after that to talk about how the Queen and the Prince Jaume, who's referred to here as the Dauphin, they are also doing great, and his daughters, the Infantas, they're doing great too. Everybody's so great. Thanks to God. And I did want to point out that in line 6, we've got Violante, referred to as Nostra Cara Compagnona. I'm not sure why he doesn't go for the full-on Molt Cara Compagnona, like the title of the podcast, but he, I think, is really, indicating still that by using this word, he's saying, this is the person that is my companion in this whole journey here of co-rule, life, so on and so forth. So, Nostra Cara Compagnona, our dear companion. And then all of the rest of the letter is, hey, there's all these things that, I know would be great if you just told me your news, all your happy tidings, blah, blah, blah. It's all just very boilerplate. In some earlier episodes where we had Violante writing to Charles III, there was a lot more personal touch and not so much the boilerplate. And I think that's definitely reflective of how Violante might have had some longer-term history with Charles III of Navarre. I have a theory that they knew each other in Paris way back when Violante was in the court of Charles V of France, just because she was part of the royal family. Charles V was her uncle, and then the future Charles III of Navarre had been sort of like taken prisoner in Paris around the time, like the late 1370s. So he was sort of like a hostage. They didn't really call him a hostage. I like to use the phrase quasi-hostage. But anyway, Charles III of Navarre was in Paris and not able to leave while his father was working out some issues with whether he was going to continue being oppositional to French interests. So that's the past, about more than 10 years in the past. And in the current moment, in 1387, Charles III has ascended to be the King of Navarre, and he's kind of the same generation as Joan and Violante. So Violante, when writing to Charles III of Navarre, you can really tell that there's some more personal touches in there, but it seems that Joan just doesn't have that level of closeness. And I say that because it's really hard to pick out any personal touches in this letter. Like, this could have been written by anybody, who just said, it could have been written by a chatbot. I mean, it's like the scribes were like the AI chatbots of the time, where Joan basically just put in a prompt saying, I just need to let the King of Navarre know that I'm very healthy, fill this thing with pleasantries, make it nice. And that's what the scribes then provided. And not only that, but he just does like a copy-paste for the Queen by not writing anything separate, just trusting it to the scribes that they've made another copy and changed the gendered endings to the nouns, like from hermano to hermana. And he's just like, yeah, copy paste that. So that's my interpretation of the surface level kind of boilerplate feeling of this letter, that Violante has some additional history or rapport with Charles III of Navarre, and Joan just doesn't have that. There is definitely a need to make other people, other powerful people, believe that he's perfectly healthy. And in my mind, if you send a boilerplate letter that, doesn't have any kind of personal touch to it all that much, you're not really being all that convincing. But I don't know, maybe it's like if you get a direct letter from one king to another, it's got, some additional oomph in terms of its believability. And so I don't know. I mean, I just don't quite see how this is better than just the rumor mill. Like, just, let the King of Navarre know that I'm healthy now. And maybe it's because Joan is not all that healthy. So maybe this is not a purely honest letter. And they're still in damage control mode because maybe the truth of the matter is that Joan has not really been bien quitio of his accident. Maybe there are some lingering effects. Well, there's no way to know. Maybe we can treat this as its surface level meaning and say, yeah, he would only write this to a fellow king if he really was 100% recovered. Or we can doubt it. And we'll see what else we can find as we continue on in our journey through the documents. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Companiona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. Because, remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, which will include links back to those earlier episodes that involved Charles III of Navarre. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.